welcome back to season 2 of Early Morning Chats. I'm your host, Lauren Earley, Director of Advocacy for ASID HQ, and I have a very special guest today for our first episode of the new season, Adrienne Lane-Martin. Say hi.
Hi, how are you?
I am so glad you're here today. I'm doing well. I hope you are too. And we look forward to hearing about all of the very exciting developments in Idaho as you're located in Boise. And really look forward to picking your brain on what that process looked like for you and what the implications are, most importantly. Before we get to Idaho specifically, I want to give us a rundown on all of the successes we have had this year and sort of why we're going to hear from Adrienne today on what's been happening in her neck of the woods. Missouri most recently had a bill that was signed into law, and Alaska passed legislation, both of which establish independent practice rights for qualified interior designers in the state. That, of course, builds on the historic success we've seen in Idaho, Utah, and some of the defeats of deregulatory efforts we saw this year in places like Utah, Florida, and Tennessee. And there are a couple of other bills that have passed so far this year, including a couple of sunset extensions and an education reform bill in New York State. So it has been a big year for advocacy, and in huge parts, in many thanks to people like Adrienne who have been doing the work at the local and ground level. And I want her to talk to us today about what that looked like in Idaho specifically. So without further ado, Adrienne, walk us through what that process was like over the last year and a half or so.
Sure, I'd love to talk about it. So in Idaho, there's a very specific sunrise committee that we actually had to go through before we even got to legislation. A few years ago, legislation passed and basically created this committee so
Mhm.
to help basically deregulate any kind of licensure because we're a big deregulation state. So in order to even try to process anything, you have to go through the sunrise committee first. And at first it felt extremely daunting because it's like you
Yeah.
have to go through the Sunrise Committee and then you also have to go through legislation. But in the end, it actually helped us prepare and teach and
Yeah.
educate a whole lot of legislators before we even got to legislation when they were in session.
Hmm.
So the Sunrise Committee meets outside of the legislation regular window. And we had about, I want to say 2 to 3 months from submitting the actual Sunrise application, which explained, what we were looking for, how we wanted to add licensure for interior designers in Idaho, which has never happened. All those different pieces. And it was a really big application. It was
Right.
pretty daunting. My counterparts with IIDA actually filled out the majority of that. And just being totally honest. And then I kind of jumped in once we had to actually
Yeah.
get in front of the Sunrise Committee. And it was one of those based on my own personal experience as an interior designer for an architecture firm. It was really helpful
Hmm.
because and why my experience kind of helped matter in the whole thing was the other two gals are part of larger architecture firms as well, but they
Right.
don't practice the same way that I do. And so it was really cool for me to get in there and show my personal experience in that, hey,
Right.
interior designers at my firm actually um submit for permit and do all the drawings and go a little bit farther than what I think most typical interior designers do, but
Sure.
it was just something how we run, how I've developed the department, all the things. So,
Yeah.
in doing that, it was really helpful to really truly educate the Sunrise Committee. So we got to meet in front of them in like a, I don't know if it was private, but somewhat public,
Yeah.
forum
Hearing
and kind of talk
room. Yeah.
but not a lot of people even know what the
Yeah.
Sunrise Committee was, and so nobody was really well. Again, we involved AIA, all the people that needed to be. But then what was really cool is we had them for like a good 2 hours. So
Hmm.
we did our presentation, and then we took them to a local project
Right.
that was done by May, my counterpart, and was really we offered them lunch and brought them through, and really were able to talk to them personally about why interior design matters. What is interior design when you actually look through the building? Like, what were the things that we touched or would touch in a public building like that?
Right.
And it was really cool. They had fantastic questions. There were definitely some naysayers in the beginning, mainly
Yeah.
because they're all about deregulation, right? It wasn't that they weren't understanding what we were doing. But I also I think the education of interior design and what we do compared to
Right.
maybe what is shown on TV or what the public thinks it is, right? It was a
Sure.
really big education moment. Um, Felt very I don't know if it's discouraging is the word, but it's kind of like just one step at a time, right? I
Sure.
think the other piece to this that was very helpful and I would highly recommend is you have to have a lobbyist.
Yeah.
Our lobbyist, Liz, is absolutely fantastic.
Great
I've
team
joked
y'all have.
that if
Yeah.
I ever stopped doing interior design, I'd become a lobbyist just to work with her because she's so amazing and
You're
just
very
knows stuff
dynamic.
and
Yeah.
is oh so great. I've learned so much from her, but just understanding personalities and different ways to work with people
Yep.
and I've learned a lot of that as a project manager at doing interior design, but it's a whole different realm when you're like fighting legislation and law and those. How do you really talk to people to get them to understand
Right.
or what you want them to know?
Yeah.
So through all this, again, this is just the Sunrise Committee.
Right.
Went through that, and so I think I'm trying to remember the time frame between that and then like their kind of decision making or when we met again, so that
Well,
everyone
it's like
could
a few
review.
more months, right? I mean,
I
I think
think
it
it
was
was a
like
few
a
months, and
6 to 8 month process in its
it
entirety. So,
it was yeah, it was. And again, we made the decision before they actually went into session.
right.
So again, this was the end of last year. But they basically like their team creates a report and then everyone gets to see it. And what was also interesting was that report was based off of things that particular person or team found on the web. It
Right.
wasn't all stuff that we'd given, and so it was also misinformation
Yeah.
that was just like, oh my goodness. So there's a lot of like this that kind of happens, and you really have to watch who's doing what and
Right.
making sure you're paying attention. And it's not to constantly correct them, but to constantly guide them, I guess, in the right way of
Absolutely.
what you really
Mhm.
want them to know. I
Yeah.
mean, making sure they do have the correct information. And it's kind of funny how they just won't reach out to get the information from
Yeah.
you,
And then
which
they'll fill gaps.
super frustrated. Well, like they were finding articles that were like from 10 years ago of this state didn't do this, and we're like, but they have since.
Yeah.
So,
Like,
it's
please.
whatever, it's which way are they swaying, right? It's always
Right.
about swaying the vote and how that works. And so you really have
Hmm.
to be just watchful in
Yeah.
an understanding and paying
Involved.
attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And there were
Um,
things that we pointed out and to our lobbyists and like how do we correct it? How do we
to
nicely
clarify. Yeah.
say, let's clarify, let's talk about this. So
Yeah.
um again had really wonderful discussion actually throughout that process. So there was the first presentation, then there was the
Right.
second presentation a month or two later, and that one was a little more I would say integrated, meaning they asked us a lot of questions. So each one of us would get up on the
Mhm.
stand and even talking to legislators, how do you do it's very formal and how do you do it,
Mhm.
and at first it was a little scary, you know what I mean, to go, you have to address each person individually and ask the questions, and but they're real people.
Mhm.
You forget that
Yeah.
they put their pants on just like us, and and a
Uh-huh.
lot of them would get personal and we'd talk to them or joke, oh, my dad was in the military, hey, we had that like,
Yeah.
connection. And so it's just it's making connections with people, and
Mhm.
it's yes, it's about the personal aspect of it, but for them it's also really about what are the facts,
Right.
because you know what I mean, everybody can tie into
They
emotions,
want
but
to
it's
serve.
really
Yeah.
they do, right? And it's awesome. So I think going through all of that, we still definitely at the end of the Sunrise Committee, basically their decision was to recommend, but with corrections, right? So they really
Mhm.
helped us draft and create the best legislation possible that they thought would actually work.
Right.
So we got them to the point where they said, and I know my counterparts were a little discouraged by that, but it was like, hang on, it's not a no, it's a
Right. We have a
yes
path
with.
forward. Right.
Right, correct. We have a path forward. And
Yep.
the ultimate decision was to basically change the language a little bit, make it a little less about additional regulation and
Hmm.
actually tie into what the architects and landscape architects already had. So if
Right.
that makes sense. So we didn't end up creating a brand new bill. We
Right.
amended
Yeah.
what the existing bill was and basically added interior designers to that
Yeah.
portion, which was a little easier for some people to swallow. And and so it was one of those that they were looking out, the Sunrise Committee was looking out for
Hmm.
us to help go, okay, moving forward, it's not just us that's deciding this, it's now the
Right.
entire legislation. How are we going to do this? What's your best foot forward? Um, Again,
And a
feels a
feasible
little,
compromise, right? I mean,
oh,
in
a
a
huge
state that's,
compromise.
not so friendly to regulation, it's got to
Correct.
be, it has to strike the right framework to satisfy all parties, which is what you were able to do. when the
And there were
legislation
some
was in place.
concessions. Like one of
Yeah,
them was we really wanted a representative on this board, the Architect
right.
and
And
Landscape
at this
Architect Board. That
time, we
was a
do
big
not
one.
yet, right.
Correct. And we didn't get that, but it doesn't mean we can't in the future. It was kind
Mhm.
of a like, okay, if that's one of your concessions, and again, you have to look at it as we had overall legislation this year for Idaho
Right,
was in major debt. And so they were looking to save every penny possible. So to
right,
them, adding someone to the board, creating a new board, anything like that was all about, oh my gosh, it's going to add more money to the state. We really can't
right.
do
The
that because they're
fiscal
doing
aspect.
major budget cuts from like major items like
Hmm.
school and that kind of thing. So it was one of those you had to look at it from their point of view, still
Hmm.
frustrating, but how can we say, okay, I understand where you're coming from right now. I still need to get to where I want to. What can I give up? Or what can I say, hey, not right now. Right?
Exactly.
We could always
Yeah,
add it later or change it later.
yeah, yeah.
So
You have hit on so many things that I wish that we could dive into today, right? But these are, short chats, and we can make more information available on and materials available through other channels and everything. But you've hit on, collaboration and the importance of relying on your state level lobbying team. And you all did a wonderful job taking our national consortium guidance. You were working as really collaborative partners throughout this process of the Sunrise application, the project tour, introduction, and pursuit of the legislation. So I love that piece. Maybe that's a full conversation for another day. And then just also hitting on that education piece. I mean, we say constantly that's a huge part of advocacy is educating legislators and the public and anyone who will listen that the things they see on TV or the conceptions they have of the profession are part of it, but there's a lot more to it as well. And talking about those health, safety, welfare implications and how you're protecting occupants' well-being within public spaces. And I know that you all had that was really involved in your Sunrise application, and then at your project tour, calling those things out too. So there's so many themes that you were hitting on, and then obviously kind of from the strategic standpoint as well, you all did a great job of taking input, making concessions where you could, understanding progress in the right direction is still progress. And knowing that, laying those foundations helps you take bigger steps in the future, I think. But well, I'd love to know sort of now that we're in the rules and regulations process and that this is almost official, and soon qualified designers just like you will be able to independently practice within that defined scope. What does this mean for you? Talk to us about what the implications are for your business. You spoke a little bit about it, the differences between designers at certain firms, and you and maybe others in your firm do submit plans and stamp plans, but talk to us about what it really will mean for you.
sure. Again, I've been an advocate of interior design legislation since I started school. My professors did a really good job. For
I
me
love to hear that.
personally, I know, right? They did a
I'm
great
like,
job.
whoo,
That
it
was the
takes an
first thing they
army.
drilled into us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Um, and I even helped my state school or my school state get in through the regulation when I was in
Yeah.
school. So it started a while
Good.
ago. But so it's important. I think just to be recognized as a profession is huge. Um again, the more you kind of work through this and hear other people to realize you are the only person at the table during construction that isn't recognized is really kind of like, oh, hang on a second, right?
Yeah.
And when you've built those relationships already with contractors and you're actually the project manager building these huge buildings and doing all the things, it is frustrating to just go, I just don't have that appellation. Like, you have it, right? You've done it.
Yeah.
They treat you with respect, your office does, like all the things, they get it. It's just why can't you be nationally recognized the way you should be?
Hmm.
And for me, it was personal. I definitely have people on my staff that will never get NCIDQ, and that's okay. That's their personal
Right.
choice. But it's one of those that I will always treat them with absolute respect because I understand what they do. I understand what I'm asking them to do. And it's just it's a big deal. And it's
Yeah.
pretty exciting. And to be honest, we all thought it was going to actually happen this year. And we're joking about racing to the line to go sign up.
Yeah.
But because of rules and regulations in Idaho, it actually takes a full year. So we have to create
Right.
all those right now with the board, and then it has to get passed again through
Right.
legislation, which
Right.
I'm not concerned about that
Very
part, but
involved
it's like,
process for
oh,
sure.
one more step. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were so excited and now we have to just wait one more year. But
Yeah.
no, it's exciting and I think just to also pass that along to other people coming after us, right?
Yes.
And understanding
Yeah.
because again, I've been fighting for this for 20 years and
Yeah.
so I honestly never thought Idaho would get there. So
I
it's kind
wouldn't have held my
of
breath. I'm so proud of you all, and
yeah.
especially too, you are living in Boise and part of the ASID Intermountain chapter, who has experienced two big successes this year. But
Mhm.
I really wouldn't have held my breath because of some of these additional regulatory, hoops you all had to jump through with the Sunrise application. But I think with everything you've outlined for us today of collaboration, strategic foresight, and really doing the work, taking the guidance from the experts, but doing the work at the local level has proven to be successful. And now, so soon, still in the scheme of things, because we always are saying that legislation and regulation take years and years. So, to
Yeah.
pass Sunrise and then pass in your first session, one more year for regulation may seem frustrating right now, but it's still quick. And in this work,
Yeah.
you'll be off to the races. And I think you're absolutely right. It's about who comes behind us. It's about the next generation of designers, whether they will get the state title or not. Like you said, a rising tide lifts all boats. So those that are
Absolutely.
qualified to get it or not, that recognition for the profession of interior design is just, it can't be overstated.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll leave it there, but I am so excited for you, and I know we'll continue collaborating throughout the rules and regulations process. I am so grateful for the impressive work you and your team and your chapter and all of our allies and counterparts at our sister organizations and all of our friends have done over the last year and a half. And I just am so happy for you. I'm very excited for you. And I thank you very much for
Yeah.
your time and your energy on today on our first episode of season 2. So thanks for
No.
tuning in.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
All right. To all of you watching at home, have a great week. Thank you.